We got an interview dropped the morning before the hearing started this past Friday. The hearing involving Bryan Kohberger and his defense's motion to reconsider the, grand jury dismissal of the indictment that the judge ruled against, and the motion to appeal, the interlocutory appeal thing. So we just went over all of that, the hearing, and now we're going to talk about this interview because they were really, the Goncalves family, they shared never before seen pictures and videos of Kaylee, which was kind of nice, seeing some of those. And they kind of talked about there's more in the article than there is in the actual video, because in the video, it's really just the interviewer talking for them, like, after the interview when she's actually on the air, and showing very short clips of actually Steve and Christy talking. But from the interview, the information we got was the family essentially feeling like they're in limbo, that they're planning their whole life around this trial without even a date in place. And I'm sure that's super crappy. Just like feeling like you can't do anything, you can't move or take a new job or do anything because you need to be here for this trial. But, they also mention like the speculation and conspiracy theories that are thriving right now with the gag order and how all of this is being handled. And they say they really want that trial date. Like they really hoped the trial date would be given, which even if the judge had given a trial date, which he did not, he said he needed to think on it. There's no guarantee it would happen by then. They could run into something where they delay it again, I
know.
But I understand their want for that and their want to like conclude all of this, and get justice for their daughter and, move on, because this is prolonging grief, and once the trial actually happens, they're probably going to see things they don't want to see and hear things they don't want to hear that are going to, or better yet said, that are going to re-traumatize, bring that grief back up. But they brought up the way Kaylee was found. So a while back, remember they came out and said that she was trapped between the wall and Maddie. And then there was all this speculation and ideas going around that Maddie was the intended target because she was attacked first. Because Kaylee was trapped between her and the wall. And that was coming right from the Goncalveses, who said that they were told this by Kathy Mabbitt. Well, they gave a very tiny extra piece in this, adding on to that. And this is what they said. They said there was an indication that their daughter fought for her life. The way the bedroom was set up is, if someone came in, you cannot get out. You're completely, totally trapped, Christy said. The bed was the entire room. You couldn't barely open the door without swiping the foot of the bed. And they go on to say that she was found sitting up against the wall. She was sitting up and slumped over, which is something we didn't know before. We were told that these kids were asleep, that all of them were asleep.
Yep.
So it's a bit odd. So how much did she fight? Like, was she asleep and woke up to Maddie and got up?
Yeah. Was she awake already?
Was she awake? Because we also know that Dylan said she heard somebody say who she thought was Kaylee, somebody's here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that the whole idea is to make the timeline fit, they had to be asleep. Because if you have multiple victims fighting back, that's going to make it take longer.
Yeah.
And that's going to put the timeline into question.
Maybe.
They're saying he got in and out in like 9 minutes.
Yeah, I know. I still think a lot can happen even with somebody fighting back in 9 minutes. I truly do.
You're right.
And I've thought that from the beginning, but where it becomes a question is not the actual hand-to-hand encounter of the people. I think if you totaled up the damage that was done with 4 people and you like started from the time of each interaction with each person, I would not be surprised to hear so 20, 40. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that a minute and 30 seconds, everything could be done in that time. Where I start having doubt is being able to get around the house with no evidence of ever being there prior, unless there is, and we don't know about it yet, doing it with no DNA and controlling the crime scene. The first thing I think about when you said she's found in the corner is, okay, did the horrible crime happen first and she wasn't gone and then she pulled herself up into the corner?
I thought about that too.
Which I doubt, man, with the extent of these wounds, you're talking seconds before enough blood comes out that you lose consciousness.
They said she got the worst of it too.
Right. Or 2, someone would have to someone would have to be on the bed to get to her in the corner.
Yeah.
So how is there no evidence?
Well,
like an abundance I'm talking about, because that requires somebody like leaning with other additional, BLOD, and that a lot has to go on, a lot of body contact with a bed and a person and reaching and like, you know what I mean?
You're right. Now it is I think a twin size, right? Or was it not? No, both of those mattresses were queens that we saw pulled out of the house. It wasn't a twin.
Yeah, you're right. I remember. Yep.
They were both queens.
Mm-hmm.
It was in the rendition, the digital rendition, that they looked like twins, and they weren't. It was a queen.
Yeah, you're right.
And with how little that room was, she's absolutely right. It would have filled the whole room.
Yeah.
That queen-size bed. And if their heads, like what we saw in the rendition, the remakes, the digital remakes, if their feet were towards the door and heads towards that back wall, you absolutely have to crawl on the bed to get to Kaylee.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I'm wondering.
Or else she has to come to you.
Mm-hmm.
She has to be out of bed or not, like, so being all the way back up against in the corner, like slumped over. Now, I guess that could explain the knife sheath and the tussle getting, but there's no way somebody could rip that off. It's leather.
Yeah, yeah.
So he would have to not have it not attached to a belt or anything. It would have to just be in his hand.
Yeah, yeah.
If that is truly the knife sheath that is part of this crime that went to the weapon.
Yep.
That went to the weapon that committed the crime. So it brings me a lot more questions, like a lot more questions, because it doesn't really seem to make sense with what we've been told so far. And I agree with you. When you have victims who are fighting back, that leaves like so much more, especially with the type of wounds we're talking about, and we're talking about blood splatter and arterial spray. That means he had to be covered in blood. Exactly. Doing that on a bed like that. He had to be.
Exactly.
So the no blood trail, like, because I heard a lot of people argue, well, if you're leaning over and doing it and your feet are on the floor and that's all on the bed, that can make sense how you wouldn't have a blood trail. Well, if they're fighting back and the whole bed is a room and she's trapped up against the wall and everything, you have to lean over pretty far. Like, you have to be, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to be really in contact with all that. A knife is very up close and personal. So I just don't think there's a way for there not to be a blood trail at all. There has to be. And again, Xana was on the floor at the foot of the bed, like away from Ethan. She fought too. So therefore, for there to be no blood trail, for there to be nothing, no blood in his car that he drove to the crime scene.
It's very strange. Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
I know.
Unless they're hiding all of that for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm sitting here just trying to think of, how it could have happened. And it does not make
It doesn't
sense.
seem possible.
Because look, I'm thinking points of contact. If you need to reach over to get at somebody because they're in the corner of the bed, you have to put your hand down, okay? And that puts pressure. And with that amount of, bodily liquid fluid stuff on the bed, it would come to your hands. It would, maybe go towards your waist when you're leaning onto it. I mean, there's too many points of contact there. It's very strange to then manage that and control that to leave no trails.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
I'm curious how high the bed was too. Like, are we talking a bed on the floor? Are we talking a bed on a high platform or like just a normal basic one? Like, what are we talking with the height of the bed? Because that will matter too, I think, a lot. But I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you have anything to add with that finding, with them saying she was sitting up?
I don't. I think we've pretty much said everything. I mean, the one thing that I would say is I hope for their sake, the Goncalves' sake, because we're seeing their trauma and recovery from this horrible situation unfold in front of our eyes, that I hope for their sake that the police have the right guy. Because man, just imagine being them and believing like progress is being made. We know who it could be, and then something comes up that proves Bryan Kohberger legitimately is not the one. Can you imagine being in their shoes? Oh no, man.
That would be terrible.
Would freak out. That would be awful, and I feel really bad for them. There's a lot of people out there in the internet that are comfortable giving Steve a hard time because he's spoken out so much and the way he presents himself and stuff like that. And let's be real, like, there are people out there that will rub other people wrong. That's just part of being a human.
Yeah.
That's just how things work.
For sure.
But it doesn't take away from the fact that he is a victim in this situation, and he is living his what's it called when I'm having an ADHD moment for getting over the loss.
Grief?
Yeah, he is living his grief in front of a camera most of the time. So to have something like that happen, where essentially everything you thought you knew comes out not to be true, it would probably be devastating, man.
Yep. It would be. It would be hard, especially with how much I mean, Steve has said he's still open, but it seems like they're pretty set on it being Bryan. But they don't have much more information than us. They claim.
I am very surprised that they are so confident it's him.
I am too. I am too. But there's a lot of emotions in play there, which can, you know, skew the way they're looking at it. They talk about the house being demolished after that, and how like Christy, and this is in the article, not in the actual video, that Christy was notified in her email the house was being demolished, and she lost it. And she said on the morning that it happened, she was waiting for a Hail Mary and was in denial and turned on the TV. And literally, as she turned it on, they were taking a swipe at Kaylee's room. And it was hard. She said it was horrible.
Yeah.
They were I still kind of can't believe they tore down the house.
There's a little bit of hope gone right there.
Yeah.
Because if Bryan Kohberger is not the guy, that you just took away the crime scene and you took away the ability to go back and potentially look for errors. You just took away the ability for a private detective, which I don't know if you guys know your stats around like private detectives, but private detectives' close rates are a lot of times double the success rate of an investigator. Probably because investigators are always working more than one case normally, and they use different methods and things like that. But you just took away that ability for a private investigator to be able to come in there and look at it firsthand. If something ever ended up not panning out, something goes wrong. It just blows me away a little bit because I feel like I'm watching this police department make decisions without having a planned backup. When, in my opinion, and my line of work in corporate America, like the backup plan is literally just as important as the plan. You can't have one without the other. You need a plan and you need to commit to it and believe that it's the right one, but you need a backup plan just in case you're wrong.
Agreed, but it was the president of the university that really wanted it tore down, and Bill Thompson was like, okay. And Taylor was too, which I understand. Like I've said from the beginning, it makes sense why the defense doesn't care, but it doesn't make sense why the prosecution doesn't care. And, like the other people who should care don't, which is weird. But anyway, she said I don't know, it's really more subjective emotional things after that. Like, there never really is any justice because him dying doesn't bring her back. And,
yeah, that's not the definition of justice, but I understand feeling like that because yes, again, that is part of grief recovery right there, is realizing that she's not just lost, but unfortunately it's very final. There is nothing that will change that,
Yeah.
And I feel for him. I really do. I really do.
Yeah.
It's really a crappy situation, the worst situation you could ever be in. And, like we talked about, what's his face earlier? I'm drawing a blank. The America's Most Wanted, John Walsh. John Walsh reached directly out to him made a statement that we talked about earlier. And hopefully she finds some kind of comfort in that and will be able to get some kind of closure. I mean, it's going to depend on how this trial goes.
Right. Yeah. And honestly, hearing this information about Kaylee sitting up and being trapped and all that, I actually had a really hard time processing that initially because I was imagining it in my non-imagining brain where I can't see images. But for some reason, that really stuck with me. And I was trying to picture what that looked like. And sometimes, which is weird with my aphantasia, where I can't see things in my head, things pop up that I can kind of see that I don't want to see, that I'm not trying to imagine. You know what I mean? And it's happening involuntary. And it kept happening with this image of Kaylee, and it was really hard for me to process because it gave me a whole nother perspective on the scene. And it just, I don't know, it's hard. Like I don't know. For whatever, that mental image of her slumped over was hard for me to think about. And especially knowing what my next topic's going to be, which is like post-mortem autopsy, determining time of death, thinking about all those processes that happen in the body. It just made it even harder. But we're going to get into that next. And let me know what you guys think about this bit of information. Like, what does it say to you? How does that change what you thought about the crime scene? I'm still processing it, honestly, but I would love to hear your ideas and opinions in the comments.
Let us know.